In Magic, casting a removal spell to take down an opposing creature feels pretty good. After all, subtracting from your opponent's board is a great way to alter the course of a game. Casting your own creature so that you add to your side of the board is great too, but you know what's way better? Playing a creature that destroys another creature when it enters. In that case, you get to add a creature to the board while simultaneously subtracting from your opponent's. That's a play that swings the game wildly in your favor, and those are the exact kind of creatures that this MTG top 10 is focused on. To be eligible for this list, a creature had to be able to destroy at least one creature when it enters the battlefield, and the effect had to be a destroy effect. Exile effects are mechanically different enough to receive their own list in the future, and effects that can target permanents of any type have already been covered in another MTG top 10. In all, there are 51 creature-killing creatures in Magic, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic the Gathering. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, this includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like regional championships. At number 10, it's Gilt-Leaf Winnower. For 3 generic and 2 black, it's a 4/3 with Menace, and when it enters, you can destroy target non-elf creature whose power and toughness aren't equal. This is a super fun design both mechanically and flavorfully. It might seem a little restrictive, but it has a target on most boards, as most creatures simply don't have symmetrical stats, and Gilt-Leaf Winnower hates on cards that aren't symmetrical because the Elves of Lorwyn have a very strict sense of beauty. Of course, the fact that the Winnower itself isn't symmetrical is kind of a flavor fail. Anyway, adding an evasive creature while destroying a creature is a powerful play, as it makes it way more likely that your opponent can't block it on the next turn. Its top 8s all came in standard between 2015 and 2016, during which time it was played in a variety of black decks, including Rakdos, Aggro, and Delirium, but perhaps the most notable deck for the Winnower was 5-color Bring to Light. These turned their deck into a toolbox, as Bring to Light would typically let them tutor up any card in their deck and cast it. A creature like the Winnower is a nice card to have one copy of in a deck like that, because when it can do its thing, it's great. As we move up the list, we're going to see a recurring theme of these creature-killing creatures showing up in toolbox decks, since they are so powerful to search up when your opponent has a creature in play that you really need to kill. However, Gilt-Leaf Winnower doesn't have any top 8 since 2016. At number 9, it's Shadowborn Demon. For 3 generic and 2 black, it's a 5/6 flyer, and when it enters, it destroys target non-demon creature. This demon is the most imposing creature on the list, as it's a large enough flyer that it can end the game quickly in the air, especially after killing your opponent's best creature. Of course, they did need to give this thing a downside to keep it from being too insane, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are fewer than 6 creature cards in your graveyard, you have to sacrifice a creature. Obviously, that means if the demon is the only creature you have to sacrifice it. So if you don't have expendable bodies and or your graveyard isn't well stocked, he does start going after your board, but it isn't like black has a super hard time achieving either of those things. Shadowborn Demon's top 8s came exclusively in Reanimator decks in Standard and Legacy between 2013 and 2014. That style of deck is perfect for the Demon, since they tend to rapidly load their graveyard before bringing back a super powerful creature at a massive discount. In Standard, this was often achieved with Unburial Rites, which was particularly nasty, since you can still cast it if it gets milled. Shadowborn Demon coming into play on turn 3 or 4 is incredibly strong and won those decks a lot of games, but Shadowborn Demon doesn't have any top 8 since 2014. At number 8, it's Bone Shredder. For 2 generic and a black, it's a 1/1 with flying, and when it enters, you destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. It also has Echo for 2 generic and a black, which means you have to pay that cost on your next upkeep or sacrifice the Shredder. While Echo is definitely a downside, most of the Shredder's value comes from the fact that it destroys an opposing creature and can hang around to block for a turn. Losing a 1/1 flyer at that point isn't going to hurt too much. Also, while the Shredder's destroy effect seems a bit restrictive by today's standards, Back in the day, black basically never got removal that could destroy other black creatures or artifacts, so this was the go-to black removal effect at the time, and it's not the last time we'll see it on this list. Bone Shredder is put up top 8s in Standard, Extended, and Legacy, generally in toolbox decks. It was tutored up with Survival of the Fittest in all 3 formats and grabbed out of the sideboard with Living Wish in Extended and Legacy. It's been played in Legacy as recently as 2023, but it doesn't have a top 8 in any format since 2017, so it may be done putting up top 8s. At number 7, it's Cavalier of Night. For 2 generic and 3 black, it's a 4/5 with lifelink, and when it enters, you can sacrifice another creature, and if you do, you destroy target creature an opponent controls. It also has a death trigger, where you reanimate a creature with mana value 3 or less. So unlike the other cards on the list, the Cavalier does make you give something up to get the removal effect, but generally speaking, adding a 4/5 lifelinker to the board and getting rid of your opponent's best creature is going to be well worth giving something up, especially if whatever you give up is expendable, or at least cheap, since if the Cavalier goes down, it can potentially bring back whichever creature you sacrificed. In Standard, most of its top 8s came in sacrificed decks. That could make that minor downside even more minor, and even turn it into upside. For example, if you sacrifice your Gutter Bones with a Mayhem Devil in play, you get a ping added to the effect, and you'll also have no problem bringing back Gutter Bones later. It's also seen a bit of play in Pioneer Rakdos midrange, as well as in modern toolbox decks that use Court of Calling and Eldritch Evolution to grab the Cavalier when it's at its best, making this yet another creature killer that has been tutored up. However, Cavalier of Night doesn't have any top 8 since 2022. At number 6, it's Big Game Hunter. For 1 generic and 2 black, it's a 1/1 that destroys a creature with power 4 or greater when it enters. It also has Madness for 1 black, which means that if you discard it, you can cast it by paying its Madness cost. While paying 3 for this isn't awesome, paying 1 definitely is, especially against decks with lots of killable targets. It didn't see any play in formats with smaller card pools like Block, Standard, or Extended, but it's been successful in all of Magic's non-rotating formats. Legacy was the first format where it found a home, appearing in Survival of the Fittest decks. While all of the cards on this list are pretty great to tutor up, Big Game Hunter had the added bonus of having Madness, so you could not only search it up with Survival, you could discard it with Survival to play it for the discount, and when you do that, you aren't even really going down a card to tutor up a creature. Survival of the Fittest got banned in Legacy in 2010 though, and Big Game Hunter hasn't seen play in the format since then. It's found some modest success in vintage survival decks, and more recently it's appeared in modern toolbox decks that use Birthing Pod, and later in decks that use Court of Calling. It was also played a bit in Hollow One decks in the format. These decks specialize in discarding tons of cards with Faithless Looting or Burning Inquiry, so that Hollow One could be free. Big Game Hunter was a card you could discard and still get value out of. However, Big Game Hunter doesn't have any top 8 since the first half of 2024, so it may be done adding to its score. At number 5, it's Noxious Gearhulk. For 4 generic and 2 black, it's a 5/4 artifact creature with Menace, and when it enters, you can destroy target creature and gain life equal to its toughness. Of all the cards on this list, it has the most powerful destroy target creature effect, since it can hit any creature and gain you life while you're at it. Taking down your opponent's best creature, adding a big body to the board, and gaining life is enough to pull you ahead even when you're pretty far behind. In Standard, it was played in Delirium decks that could use Traverse the Ulvenwald to grab their Singleton Gearhulk, and it also found some success in more traditional control decks. It went idle for a while after rotating out of Standard, but since 2024, it's seen regular play in enigmatic Incarnation decks. Incarnation is, of course, another way to tutor up the Gearhulk, which it allows you to do when you sacrifice enchantments. These decks recently got a huge upgrade as a result of the printing of the Overlords and Duskmourn, since they are expensive enchantments you can put on the board cheaply thanks to Impending. They give you value right away, and then you can sacrifice them to Incarnation to search up powerful 6-mana creatures, like your Singleton Noxious Gearhulk. Noxious Gearhulk is actually one of the most active cards on this top 10, and it's very likely to move ahead of both the number 3 and number 4 card in the future. For now though, that number 4 card is Nekrataal. For 2 generic and 2 black, it's a 2/1 with First Strike, and when it enters, you destroy target non-black, non-artifact creature. A 2/1 First Strike is a surprisingly relevant body on many boards, especially after you kill your opponent's best creature. This is the progenitor of all the other cards on this list. This is because it was printed in Visions, the set that introduced the idea of enters triggers for creatures. Before this, creatures mostly just attacked and blocked, and had abilities that made them better at doing those things, but Nekrataal and other creatures and visions gave creatures spell-like effects. In this case, you had terror stapled to your creature, and it was at this point players first realized how powerful it was to add a body to the board and take away your opponent's best creature at the same time. It was heavily played in Standard, where it was the very first of its kind to see play in Survival of the Fittest decks. In other runs through Standard, it saw more play, and most recently it was played in Modern Birthing Pod decks, but it hasn't gained any points since the pod got banned in early 2015, so it's about to be passed by the much younger Noxious Gearhulk. At number 3, it's Ravenous Chupacabra. Very much modeled after its great-grandfather Nekrataal. It doesn't have First Strike, but it has the same mana cost, comes with 1 more toughness, and has a better removal effect since it can destroy any creature an opponent controls. Certainly the most basic version of this kind of card, the Chupacabra doesn't come with any fancy bells and whistles, but it also doesn't come with any restrictions. And that has led to it seeing play in multiple formats. It did the most in Standard, but has seen sporadic play in Historic, Pioneer, and Modern. However, it doesn't have any top 8 since 2023. Speaking of Ravenous Chupacabra, I'm pretty ravenous too, for subscribers. I'm closing in on 100,000, and I'd really like to hit that milestone later this year, and I could use your help. If you haven't already subscribed, you should, as it's free, and it'll help you stay aware of the several Magic the Gathering videos I put out every single week. At number 2, it's Ertai Resurrected. It's 2 generic, a blue and a black, for a 3/2 with flash, and when he enters, you get to choose one of 2 options. There's the one that qualified it for this list, which lets you destroy another target creature or planeswalker, but you can also counter a spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, and in both cases your opponent gets to draw a card. Giving Ertai Flash makes him even more spell-like than the other cards on this list, and while your opponent getting a card back is a downside, the fact that Ertai can deal with so many things, creatures, planeswalkers, and stuff on the stack, makes up for the fact that your opponent gets to draw. Also, in a pinch, you can destroy or counter your own thing to draw a card. In Standard, Ertai has seen regular play ever since being printed, perhaps most notably in Esper Rafine decks. This was a mid-range deck with a heavy legendary creature theme, so Ertai was not only a really nice interactive spell, but his legendary typing made your Kamigawa Channel Lands and Plazas of Heroes even better. Ertai is also currently seeing play in Pioneer Dimir Control and Legacy Vial decks, which like to put creatures into play with Aether Vial and abuse their enters triggers with Soul Herder and Yorion. Ertai is going to continue to put up top 8s, but it's highly unlikely to ever catch the number 1 card on this list, which is Shriekmaw. For 4 generic and a black, it's a 3/2 with Fear, and when it enters, you destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. It also has Evoke for 1 generic and a black. This is an alternate casting cost, and if you cast it that way, you sacrifice Shriekmaw when it enters. In other words, when you evoke it, you're mostly just paying for the removal effect, which effectively makes the floor on Shriekmaw a sorcery speed terror, and it means you can cast this early when you have to. Of course, you get more value if you play it out as a hard-to-block creature that also destroys your opponent's best creature, but sometimes you have to remove something early, and this does the job when you need it to. This has led to Shriekmaw seeing significant play in every format apart from Vintage, often in the various toolbox decks that have already been discussed in the video. It's also been played in decks like Modern Living End, where you can evoke it early to kill something, and then later in the game when you cast Living End, it gets reanimated and you get the trigger all over again. And it also went along for the ride in Modern and Legacy Scam decks, which used cards like Not Dead After All to abuse cards that had Evoke, because you could evoke a card like Shriekmaw, use Not Dead After All to bring it back, then it would come back into play, you'd get the trigger again, and Shriekmaw would stick around. That said, so far in 2025, it doesn't have any top 8s. It's hard to count out Shriekmaw entirely though, as it has such an impressive resume. So, those are the top 10 creatures that kill other creatures in Magic. If you like to add to the board while subtracting from your opponents, check out the description where you can find the direct Card Kingdom link for each card in the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. And if you want to catch up on past videos, including over 850 MTG top 10s, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.